The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Stock Market Authority podcast. I'm Bakes, Kevin Baker. I'm going to teach you how to make money in up and down markets. Very few podcasters or coaches cover this. I'll show you how to lock in profits and minimize losses to make you a better investor. So once a week, you're going to know what's going on in the world and the stock market. Welcome to the Stock Market Authority podcast. Good morning, everyone. This is Bakes, Kevin Baker's Stock Market Authority. It's Wednesday, the 19th of July. I can't believe it's this far into 2023. Welcome to everybody. And as you can probably tell, we got a different format going on. Normally I come here and I talk to my friends from the University of Houston MBA program, the Bucknell Student Management Investment Fund, and everybody else. And I talk a lot about charts. I'm a very visual person. I like to go technicals first, fundamentals second. But I want to prove that I'm not just a pretty face looking at charts all the time. I do a lot of fundamental work. I just do them in a different chronology than most people. And I found, after interviewing thousands of CEOs and thousands of CFOs, when I get the technicals right and they align with the fundamentals, that's where the biggest winners are. So do me a favor, shameless plug, go to my YouTube channel and subscribe, please. It's painless, it's free, and please do it. Today, I'm interviewing a private company, not publicly traded, not on the stock exchange. It's an oncology company, SciTech Development. There's no chart here, obviously, but the due diligence is the same. And my process is honed after going through 25 plus years of meetings with thousands of C-suite executives, and poor David Schaffer, the head of investor relations at SciTech, has sat through a lot of these, so he knows what's coming. Poor Earl Holsapple, I'm pronouncing that right, I hope, the CEO, president, co-founder of SciTech, joins us. We're going to check in on their progress. Gentlemen, welcome to Stock Market Authority.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Morning, Banks. Thanks, and great to see you as always.
Good to see you, my friend. Now, he's a friend, but I'm not going to be softballing this. So this is going to be like we sit down at the J.P. Morgan Healthcare Conference, capitalism speed dating. You go through 45-minute interviews, 12 a day, and you frankly use this as a sieve. You know, is this worth doing more real nitty-gritty research on? So I know a lot about the company, but I sure as heck don't everything. So I'm going to go through what I would normally go through in that interview process to get to the crux of the matter, and I'm going to start this the way I start all these things. Earl, because David, I know yours to an extent. Earl, please tell me your path. How do you define SciTech, and how do they find you?
Okay, well, I found SciTech after I had gotten out of the food industry, believe it or not. I was in the leverage up buyout business and sold a company and volunteered for a cancer center in Detroit. While at the cancer center, I got put in charge of a new product think tank, which was kind of fun. And as a result of that, the National Cancer Institute came to us because they were conducting a clinical trial of a drug and said, help us solve the problem of this drug. So I got recruited because I was the only business guy inside of the Institute, other than the top leadership, to come up with create a new SBIR company to solve the problem for the NCI. So that's how I got involved in this whole field. Prior to that, I ran consumer products.
This is what period of time, Earl? So, this is about when, just for my curiosity?
Say again, please.
This is about when? What time? What year? Ballpark.
Okay, so all right. This was around 2000.
Okay, great.
Yeah. I was also involved in the development of other technologies, like a new breast cancer detection technology that was recently approved. So I've had a lot of fun sort of developing and bringing products to the point where they're useful in either diagnosing or treating cancer. So that's how I got here.
Okay, I appreciate that. David, please tell me the story, and you guys can decide, how to divvy these up, but tell me the story of how the SciTech Development program was developed, please.
I'll start. Earl will come in and finish here. It's really the foundation of where we are. So The idea of developing a delivery platform for water-insoluble drugs is not new. The idea of developing a platform for water-insoluble drugs that can be delivered safely and effectively is quite challenging. And over time, there have been probably dozens, maybe even hundreds of different attempts to do this. We've seen several trials that show a lot of failure, a few successes. Ours was developed out of a nanoparticle phospholipid bilayer structure, which wraps itself naturally around the water-insoluble molecule. It was not an easy task. It took Ralph Parchment, the innovator, about 15 years to do. So this is a long, hard row. There's a tremendous moat built around this delivery platform and significant IP around the molecule as a result.
Go ahead, Earl.
Let me add a little bit. I mean, so I was telling you about Karmanos and the NCI. So what happened was that they were doing a study of this drug called fenretinide, which is the drug that we've solved the delivery problem for. And they couldn't give enough drug to the patient and still get the therapeutic response, but they did see interesting data. So they challenged us. The NCI challenged us to come up with a new way to deliver the drug, and that's how we really got started with this whole endeavor.
And what's the history of fenretinide for those of us who don't know all the details? Who had it? What were they treating, and what happened with the patients and the trials and so forth? Please, Earl.
I mean, the history is amazing. I mean, this drug has been under development for decades. It was first invented by Johnson and the old Johnson and Johnson as a skin disease therapeutic to be delivered systemically or orally. That study failed because the drug was not bioavailable. Then they decided to try it in a low dose form, orally delivered again in a capsule, to treat breast cancer prevention for women that had breast cancer. So it was a 3,000 patient, 5-year study that showed that the drug was exceptionally safe, relatively speaking. And that it was better therapeutically than the drug that became the standard of care, which is tamoxifen. Yet J&J was somewhat behind in the development of this, so they chose to therefore transfer the technology instead of continuing it to the National Cancer Institute, who then spent the next decades funding clinical studies and preclinical studies, beyond so many, it's almost staggering. And out of that, they learned that the drug is a great therapeutic. It's cytotoxic, so to speak. It kills cancer cells in numerous cancers, and it's safe. So that was really what made them like it. But the other thing was it's a highly differentiated drug in that it attaches to all cells, but only results in cell death for those cancer cells, not healthy cells. So that's why they spent so many years trying to make it work, because of that great potential and because of the anecdotal data from the clinical studies that they had been conducting.
And why apply SDP, your delivery platform, to fenretinide first, please?
Well, it's really the other way around. So remember, the NCI asked us to come up with a delivery system for fenretinide.
Okay.
So we created it for fenretinide and then realized it had great potential for delivering other drugs that were hydrophobic or toxic or whatever.
What other drugs are you working on currently deploying SDP technology, if any?
None.
Okay, none for now. Okay, fine. David, who are the customers, patients, doctors? I usually ask customers, but in this case, who are the patients? Who are the doctors? How many of them have they already been treated? Give me a sense of that landscape, please.
As you point out, the customers for an early stage or preclinical company like SciTech currently are the clinical sites, the ability to effectively recruit those clinical physicians who will be running our trial, becoming medical advisors to the company. We have presently over 20 different sites that have shown interest in wanting to host our clinical trial. The current leads are the University of Pittsburgh and the University of Southern California, though, as I said, the list is now over 20 that are showing interest. In addition to that, we've put together a medical advisory board that really is will be tremendous in terms of supporting the SciTech effort. Those are lead lymphoma doctors from MD Anderson, Columbia University, and Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center. Beyond the clinical trial, as you point out, it's all about getting to the physicians, it's getting to the patients. They're all in search of cancer treatments that would show a better likelihood of patient benefit versus existing options. And we think that's exactly where ST001 is headed.
And this is T-cell lymphoma for right now, correct?
Yes, T-cell lymphoma is the first target, or as our landscape currently sits, small cell lung cancer, likely to be number 2 with breast cancer. Number 3, there are another dozen or so cancer types behind that where there's already both direct and indirect data on the effectiveness of fenretinide in treating those cancers.
All right, help me out with this because I need focus. My ADHD rages sometimes. So for right now, it's T-cell lymphoma or bust. We can talk. Is that a fair statement for right now?
Yes.
Okay.
It's T-cell lymphoma because there's prior clinical data using fenretinide that has shown great responses, as much as 2/3 response rates. Unfortunately, they used ingredients in the delivery system to solve the delivery problem that caused side effects. So but it's great proof of concept for us, and so we're going for the low-hanging fruit to get early approval from the FDA.
How many patients suffer from T-cell lymphoma that are candidates for your trial and hopefully ultimately your treatment, ST001?
It's what they call an orphan disease, a rare disease. So there are probably about 5,000 patients a year in the U.S. for the various T-cell indications we're going after.
Okay. And my suspicion is this is a little bit like the other orphan drugs, is that once you have a treatment, it doesn't become so orphan and you find more patients. Is that a fair statement?
Well, yes. I mean, we've got a clinician who says that going after T-cell is going after an entree treatment, so that it's really a way to get into the clinic, prove initial efficacy, and then move on. So I guess you called it gateway. So move on to other cancer types.
Okay. We're going to go for a break in a minute, but before I do that, I want to ask David, how are T-cell lymphoma patients treated now, please?
There are several different treatment options that are prescribed for T-cell lymphoma patients today. The most widely used is a combination therapy called CHOP, C-H-O-P, which is an acronym for the 4 leading medicines that are used in combination. The therapy does show a modest amount of success. It's also very toxic to the patient, so it's somewhat limiting in terms of its long-term use. And in addition to that, depending on the type of T-cell lymphoma, it could be surgery, radiation, chemotherapy. You're seeing a new wave of targeted antibodies, immunotherapies, genetic-based drugs. All of these are becoming options. However, as you move down that curve, the cost goes up significantly, the risks go up significantly. The challenge with many of those existing treatments is that they're simply not very effective. They're toxic to the patients, or they're used to the point where patients develop immunity to those therapies. What we like about ST001, based on the history and the data, is it seems to overcome all of those challenges.
And the patients you're treating or hope to treat, are they treatment naive at the top of the funnel, or have they gone through all the litany of treatments that you just described, please?
The latter.
Okay.
They're late stage patients, typically stage 4, who have tried every therapy available and they didn't get the results they needed.
And so what does success look like? What data do you need to have something that the FDA will approve, in your view, please?
Well, so we've got the example of the emulsion study that I talked about, where there was a 67% response rate. Our goal is to at least replicate that level of responses, absent the side effects that they had from the use of ingredients that were somewhat toxic. Okay.
And the emulsion study, that was, stage 4 patients predominantly?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Fine. That's great. And the approximate cost of, let's say, CHOP, if that's the first line that they try for T-cell lymphoma patients, what's that? If I'm an insurer, what am I going to pay for that every single year?
Well, to Target and CHOP, I mean, they're in the range of about $75,000 a cycle, so to speak. So let's say every 6 months, $75,000.
Okay. If you're successful, you could charge a premium to that, I assume, correct?
We're not the pharmaceutical companies that'll probably be marketing, but our cost will allow us to sell it for significantly less. Where it will actually get priced is a little premature to guess.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break, but I want to, a little teaser, I want to ask why I care about phase 1. I'm going to go through some good, bad, and ugly, and I'm going to go through some catalysts right after this quick break. Thank you very much.
Do you want to become a better investor? Do you want to learn how to make money in both up and down markets? Then you need to go to stockmarketauthority.com and sign up for our free newsletter today. Stock Market Authority is run by award-winning investment manager Kevin Bakes Baker. His aim is to save you time while teaching you how to be a better investor. Bakes saves you time by diving into all the latest stock market news and information so that you don't have to. He reads all the latest articles, analyzes the charts, and listens to all the relevant podcasts. And then once a week, he gives you a breakdown of what's happening in the market. Stock Market Authority is constantly outperforming the S&P and the HFRX. Bakes is going to share with you his weekly stock observations. He'll give you concise insights and show you how to lock in profits and minimize losses. Stock Market Authority is making money in up and down markets. Wouldn't you like to do the same? So join now and let Bakes show you how. Head on over to stockmarketauthority.com and sign up for our free newsletter today. That's stockmarketauthority.com, making money in up and down markets.
And we're back, and today we're talking to Earl Holsapple, the CEO of SciTech, and my good friend David Schaffer, Investor Relations, Business Development. And gentlemen, we talked about this a little bit before the show started, but I want to delve into again, and I'm going to take the gloves off a little bit. Why do I care about phase 1? If this is a public company, phase 1 doesn't move the stock. For a private company, I don't think it increases valuation all that much. It seems like that's sort of table stakes until you get to phase 2 and 3, and you get to something that can file that has real data that the FDA will likely approve. So I'll say it again. Why do I care about phase 1?
Great question, Bakes. You have to look at it and recognize that the FDA has changed the way they set up clinical trials compared to what they used to. So we have what they refer to as an accelerated trial. And it's accelerated in terms of the dose escalation process and the number of patients required to confirm safety and then subsequently efficacy. So we break our study down into phase 1A and B. Phase 1A is similar to a phase 1 safety study, but with a lot less patients, a much shorter period of time. We can confirm safety almost immediately once we start putting patients online and start seeing efficacy in phase 1. Phase 1B, we arrive at a therapeutic dose, we treat the patient and confirm the kind of efficacy that I talked about before. And so it's a 44-patient study, 18 months. A typical phase 1 would be 18 to 24 months and a lot more patients. Phase 2 would be even longer, and then going into phase 3. So we have guidance from the FDA on how to get FDA approval to sell our drug for T-cell patients. Once we have completed the 18-month study, so we're anticipating we could be in the market in less than 2 years. So that's why you should give a damn. It's not like anything you might have seen before.
Okay, so I still didn't hear anything about phase 2 or 3. So enlighten me. Do you need a phase 2? Do you need a phase 3? And it's just one accelerated? I'm still unclear, please.
So the FDA's guidance is come back to us as we're collecting efficacy data in phase 1B, assuming that the response rates are as high, say, as were in the emulsion study. The number of patients we have will be sufficient. We will not need to go to a typical phase 2 or 3. We'll move straight to NDA approval.
Okay. And 44 patients, that's all you need?
Well, 44 patients, but it depends on the response rates and whether there are side effects. We don't believe there will be any. So based on that, yes. But if we had a lesser performing drug, it might require more patients.
Are you enrolling patients right now as we speak?
We're about to enroll. So we're ready to start the trial in about 6 weeks, as David said, first at the University of Pittsburgh Medical School Center, and then on to University of Southern California. So that enrollment starts as soon as the contract is signed.
Okay.
Shouldn't take it. Both sites say they got patients, they could enroll immediately.
And is this similar to I go to the Genzyme example, Gaucher's? Is there advocacy groups that are strident, that are lobbying like crazy, that disseminate this type of information, or am I barking up the wrong tree?
No, there's so the advocates for us are the clinicians. I mean, David and I were at a clinicians meeting in New Orleans a few months ago, and we were followed around by every clinician wanting to learn more about our drug and test it in their location. So they'll be the advocates initially. You're
sure it wasn't your scintillating personality and your penchant for etouffee? No?
Well, it might have been David. I don't know about myself.
All right. Okay, let's cut to the chase now. Competitors. Tell me either the current competitors that are out there or trials, competing trials that either may drain patients or take away a lot of the patient population if they have succeeding clinical trials, please. Who are the competitors?
David, do you want to take that one, David?
So the competitors out there, specific to fenretinide, there was one that created the emulsion delivery platform, a group out of UCLA. That was a group called CERX. They brought the product into a phase 2 trial where it subsequently produced the response rates that Earle was talking about earlier, that roughly 2/3 response rate, which is extremely high in the oncology space. But it also produced dose-limiting toxicities due to triglyceridemia or heavy triglyceride saturation in the emulsion itself. So it proved to not be competitive. Targretin, its use is very limited. It's also very toxic, as is most chemotherapy. For anybody who's ever been through it or knows somebody who's been through it, it's truly like trying to crawl through a mud field in many respects. And as we've talked about with T-cell lymphoma and starting in the later phases, phase 3, phase 4, it's our expectation that over the period of perhaps a couple of years, ST-001 will, we believe it will likely become the frontline treatment in T-cell lymphomas, and then expanding to other cancers as well. So from a broader market perspective, every large company has an oncology effort. Many of them generating billions of dollars in revenue. Keytruda is the largest oncology product in the marketplace today. Last year, producing a number closing in on $20 billion a year in revenue. So it's an incredibly important revenue producer for Merck, and Merck is constantly looking for ways to expand the market presence of that drug. So from a competitive perspective, we think we're in the right spot. We think we've got a product that will show itself to be safe, reconfirm efficacy. As Earle indicated, we believe it will be affordable, and as we've talked about, the impact it will have on multiple cancer types, not just a single cancer type.
Bakes, can I add one thing to that?
Sure.
When we were at that clinical conference in New Orleans a few months ago, the clinicians were going through the pipeline of possible drugs coming available for their use, and the list was almost non-existent. So I think they were.
Earl? What's the most promising one that they mention that, as I do what we used to call trade checks, I can go talk to them, put them into Google alerts, and monitor what they're doing so that their good news isn't bad news for you, please.
Well, I don't mean to sound ignorant, but I don't think we took note of the ones that they were looking at because they were all very limited in their scope and far away from a developmental point of view. The immunotherapies and targeted therapies that they had been counting on failed. So we didn't see anything there that was a threat. They started talking about N of 1 studies where they would combine various drugs on an individual basis with patients. There's no way they were going to be talking about that if there was a therapy that was really promising. And that's why they paid so much attention to us, not because of our looks, but because we had something that was very promising and they wanted to be part of it and they were excited. And the reason they hadn't paid attention till recently was because they thought those immunotherapies were going to work, and they didn't.
Okay. I guess, Earl, give me the bear story. When you find the people who don't like your good looks and your penchant for etouffee, they say this isn't going to work, and these are I've seen this movie. This is why it's going to fail. What do they say, please?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a new drug. I mean, despite the fact that we're enabling an active drug that's been around for years and been shown to be safe, you combine it in a new form, in a new molecule, it could perform differently than we anticipate. So that would certainly be a possibility. There's the possibility of other drugs all of a sudden coming on the scene that we didn't see coming. There's the failure to raise the capital required that we need to keep this rapidly accelerating clinical trial going. So there are lots of things that go wrong, but I think from a risk reward point of view, this one's pretty ideal because there's so much known about the ingredients and the drug itself, so it's likely to be safe. There's so much known about its potential as a therapeutic when you get the dose levels up to the prescribed level, and we've got a great team to execute on this from every angle. So I think that we don't have the kind of advisors coming from MD Anderson or Columbia or Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center in Washington coming on board, or Tony Polverino, who was a real expert in this field, coming on board to work with us if they didn't believe this was a low risk, high probability opportunity.
I'm going to betray my ignorance. That ghost levels, what is that, please? That's a new term for me.
Ghost levels?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
You just mentioned something about ghost levels.
Dose. Oh, dose levels.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah,
it's the amount of drug that actually gets into the blood.
Dose I know. And how is this administered, please? And what are the challenges that creates, please?
Well, it's an intravenous drug. It's a nanoparticle intravenous drug. So the patient has to come into an outpatient setting and stay there for about 4 hours to be infused. The prior competitive product that Dave talked about, Cyrex's, they had to stay in the hospital. So it's a five-day infusion. So they have to come back 5 days in a row, and then they're observed for 2 weeks, and then they go to the next dose. Challenges? I don't know. I don't think we see serious challenges. This kind of administration takes place every day. Probably the hardest part is for the patient to show up at the clinical site 5 days in a row. So we're picking sites where that's easier, not picking rural sites where they have to travel in from a long distance. So, but it's really looking good.
And you're enrolling everything in the U.S., correct?
Yes.
Have you hired a CRO?
No, we've got we're working with some of the new data systems that allow us to manage every aspect of it ourselves. We've got a chief medical officer who's working with us. We've got monitors who are working with us, and we think that the new data management systems give us everything we need, at least initially. We're only starting off with 2 sites. When we get up to 6 or 8 sites, the odds are we will bring in a CRO because it will overtax our ability to manage so many patients and sites.
And for my audience, I delve into acronyms all the time, and I apologize. That's Contract Research Organization, and they're the ones that tend to work, get hired by firms like SciTech, firms like Merck, firms like Lilly, et cetera, to run the clinical trials, find the patients, find the sites, et cetera, and and monitor all the data. Earl brought it up, David. Raising money. This is biotech. It's eternal. What's the cash level now? What's the burn? What are the capital raising milestones that you have out there that might get people enthusiastic, please?
The current cash level supports the effort through the early stages of the accelerated phase 1. The current capital raise that we've just opened will extend that runway to through the accelerated phase 1A trial and prepare us for phase 1B, and that will leave a Series A funding that will get us through, we believe conservatively, through to commercialization. The total amount of remaining funding that we believe is necessary based on the FDA guidance to get to commercialization is $17 million. The current burn rate is roughly $80,000 a month. The capital raising milestones and the value improving catalysts, including the completion of manufacturing of the clinical batch, the execution of the first clinical site, the dosing of the first patient, and the dosing and the data from subsequent patients, I believe will all act as very strong catalysts to enable us to keep capital coming into the company, and matching the acceleration of expenses that Earl just outlined. But we're comfortable, as we've talked to a number of investors, that the confirming data that we collect from the trial will be the most significant catalyst and will likely bring in the most capital in the quickest manner.
All right. So if you were a publicly traded company, because when I hear manufacturing sites and dosing first patients, those are not stock moving events. Those are expenses. And catalysts to me are synonyms for revenue de-risking events. So through that prism, over the next 12 to 24 months specifically, what are the data, or what are the catalysts that fit my definition of a catalyst over that time period, please?
And I thought you were going to keep softball questions out of this space. I thought it was flak check.
Love me warts and all. Love me warts and all, Dave. You want to play softball? Call Jenny Finch.
The top line catalyst that you will likely see will involve licensing of ST-001 prior to the FDA approval. Those licenses typically are milestone based and bring in non-dilutive capital, which is a significant catalyst and a significant valuation needle moving event. We would think that combination therapy type catalysts where ST-001 will be tried or put in the clinic side by side with existing drugs or with other advancing therapies will be very significant to valuation improving efforts that you'll likely see. Number two, there will likely be other pharmaceutical companies that will show an interest in wanting to help develop this drug, and their insertion of capital into SciTech, I think, also would be a meaningful catalyst from a credibility perspective or from a third-party validation perspective. And then finally, as you look at visibility on revenue, I think that's ultimately where the funnel ends, is that we've got an initial addressable market that we're looking at for the first 3 cancer types that is approximately $2 billion. And while no cancer company or no cancer product could ever expect to gain 100% of any addressable market, It's for a product like this, which we think could become a frontline treatment. Let's say within a 3 to 5 year period of its approval, you could reasonably expect to see market shares of that $2 billion TAM approach 25, 30, 35% of the market. So you could start to see visibility on that kind of a number once the FDA would approve the product, post the phase 1B trial.
I and you are extraordinarily skeptical of TAMs. I mean, that's blue sky. And so what I heard was that there's 5,000 patients that fit the bill. That's the only thing you're going after right now, and it's a $75,000 number. So that sounds like the TAM for right now. So what is the data that is coming up and when that would give some enthusiasm to the aforementioned partners, other pharma companies, so they write you a check? Please.
Well, let me try that one. So I think that the important data first is the safety data, what you would typically see out of an old-fashioned phase 1A, or phase 1, okay? Followed right behind that, based on our accelerated trial, is the efficacy data. So the efficacy data is really, in my humble opinion, the holy grail, the proof of concept that absolutely establishes this as a drug of very significant potential, both as a monotherapy and a combo therapy. And you don't see response rates in the 2/3 range very often. You don't see a drug that's likely to be relatively safe and maybe have minimal side effects like diarrhea or night blindness. So, that if that doesn't entice people to put money in, I don't know what would. And then you look at the markets David talked about. This drug has likely potential use in both solid tumors and blood disorders. So you can talk about T cell, but we could rapidly and will most likely be rapidly in other diseases quickly.
What are we going to know about the current patients that you're trying to enroll in the next 6 weeks? When do we see data in T cell lymphoma that suggests that this thing works, please?
About 9 months into the study, we would have pretty solid both safety and early efficacy data.
Okay, so let's say it's safely 12 months. You've got data on 44 patients for T-cell lymphoma, and it says the response rate is X. Fair?
Well, no, because the study is an 18-month study, so that conclusion comes at the end of 18 months.
Okay, so some data on some patients at the end of 12 months.
Correct.
Okay, and if the response rate comes in at 62%, what kind of a problem do you have on your hands, please?
That's not material. We're talking about a broad range here. We're talking about high efficacy rates, however you want to characterize it. And so, so I don't think whether it was 50 or 75 is going to materially change.
Okay, I just heard the 67% number of times, and I wanted to make sure that a 62 wasn't a miss. That's my point. Now, because I know you guys like to go there, but I'm going to put a little bit of parameters on it. Give me the top 2 opportunities that you face or present themselves for ST-001 in other cancers, please.
Well, I'd like to start there. So it's been shown to be very effective in a very bad setting in small cell lung cancer, for example. This data was collected by our inventor at the Kamanos Cancer Institute, where there were significant stabilization of disease despite the fact that the drug didn't reach high doses. So that is certainly one. But there are other aggressive cancers for which we're going to go after. The women's health disease, like aggressive breast cancer or ovarian or pancreatic cancer. And what's really going to drive us to which one is next is more the kind of data that we can collect using AI and accumulating everything that's known from all the hundreds of studies that I described to you previously, in all the clinical studies that really didn't have anything to do with our drug. So they're big. They're big.
You hit the over 39 minutes, and AI comes up. That's better than what Kroger did the other day. Hey, listen, I hope you had fun. I hope you enjoyed this. Earl, David, hope we meet again and we talk about your progress. Did you have fun today?
Yes, this is great. We love these questions. Yeah.
All right.
Love you, Bakes.
Number one, okay, I don't have a fancy legalese disclaimer, but you're smart people. This isn't financial advice. I'm not soliciting a buy or a sell. I like David, but I'm going to do a lot more due diligence if I ever invested in this. David, do me a favor, give your contact info. We'll have it in the show notes as well. But how do people reach out to you?
David, it's David Schaffer. It's DRS at SciTechDevelopment.com. Email, and look forward to the inbound traffic and helping you understand SciTech, in most positive and productive way. And
for my audience, what I would do after I leave this, I'd say, okay, I think there's something going on here. I need to do more work. I would grab the offering memorandum that's out there that, discloses every conceivable risk and opportunity that is there, that's available. There obviously is a lot of information on the website. You can go talk to doctors and what have you. But I would leave here and say, yeah, there's something going on here. It's worth doing some more work. And after we talk about T-cell lymphoma and other cancers, I like to finish with, first of all, before I do that, please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe. I'm going to be doing a lot more of this if you tell me to. So I need to hear from you as to, is this helpful? Does it add value? Do you want to see more of it? But after talking about cancer for 45 minutes, I need some much-needed levity, and I think you do too. So this is Don Gavin, a great Boston comedian. I'm not good with money. I want to see you next week. I'm very likely to go more nuclear. That's a tease. And I hope you had a great time, and I will see you next week. Keep smiling, and I'll see you soon. Earl, David, thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you, thanks.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.